prison ran programs, they're thinking, 2 months, 3 months before you're going home. That preparation should begin way at the beginning, because you can't pack 3 months of preparation for someone who's been incarcerated for 20, 25 years in 3 months.
Okay, it's EB, your voice Success After Lockdown. We here today with the lovely Miss J. Alexandria Hunt-Garcia, and it's a privilege, an honor to finally meet you after seeing you on LinkedIn, and we appreciate you being here with us at Success After Lockdown.
Yeah,
So my partner, sorry for cutting you off too. My
you're good.
partner, he's in Florida, and so he has his own business, and he's really busy. But he would have been here today, but hopefully he might come in later on. But listen, the show don't stop, man. Let's do it. The information don't stop. We got to get it out, and look for brighter days. I if I could, because this is our first time actually meeting each other formally on StreamYard. My name is Eric Benson. I'm from New York City, born and raised in the Bronx, and I served 27 years and 6 months incarcerated for taking a young person's life that was just like me, young. We were young at the time in the streets, selling drugs, and that's something that I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. However, I never let that be my crutch, my last bad decision in life, so I won't be defined by that. And since I come home August 10th, 2020, I created this platform called Success After Lockdown. Now, a lot of people might look at it and think, this is a bunch of rich people on here, everybody is successful. And I'll define success as in measures. I measure success. And so one's being and what they're doing in life, after they bad choices that they made. This is why I created this platform, to highlight those men and women that's formerly incarcerated and that's home and staying home and giving back to the community in some way or another positively. So this was something that was in the making for me 10, 15 years prior to me coming home. Creating this platform. It's always saying that I wanted to make sure that I highlight, because I begin to stay in touch with those individuals that was going home and staying home. And it's a huge network out there. And now me coming into this space called LinkedIn and meeting people like yourself and others all over, everywhere, I think that it's a good movement, a positive movement to have, an educational movement to have, because a lot of society, they think that, I think that it's a stereotype on people like you and I that's formerly incarcerated, that when we've been in jail, we going back. And that's not the case with everybody, So I just want to hand this over to you, and for you to just tell, my audience, my followers and family about yourself, where you come from, where you live, and who's J. Alexandria Hunt-Garcia.
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, I think that's incredible that the dream that you had, while you were still inside has come true. And I think it's so important to uplift us and start shifting those stigmas of what people think about when they think of people who've been to prison, because, in reality, we're all just people who happened, to make a bad decision, whether it was because of circumstances or, lack of resources. So I do, thank you for creating this. I think it's an incredible platform to have. But yeah, so my name is Jay. I was born and raised in Arizona, various cities throughout Arizona. I had an interesting childhood. My parents divorced when I was really young. And, on one end, I had one parent who, was well off financially, but there was a lot of trauma involved there. So a lot of that trauma, trickled down to us children. And then my father is generational incarceration. So my father had been to prison. We experienced that. It took quite a long time for my dad to finally start to get things right. He's a great guy, but he
Right.
struggled as well. So we grew up around, a lot of drugs, a lot of poverty, unless we were at our mom's house, but it was just a lot of different types of things going on. Lots of men in and out of our lives, lots of violence in the home, and that led to kind of what I dealt with when I was in high school, which was escapism. I wanted so badly to escape the things that I'd experienced, and that was how I ended up in prison. I finally found something that I could cope with, and a group of people where I felt I belonged, and that was the drug community. It has its own culture, and I truly felt like I belonged there. And so I was 19 when I went to prison for the first time. And, at 19, I didn't have kids yet. I was young. I was just running and gunning. And I really want to say I wasted that time in prison. I came
Mhm.
home. There was no access to programming. There was no access to anything. So when I came
Absolutely.
home, I was just now I was a 21-year-old who could legally drink and, just popped off, started right back off where I started.
Mhm.
And from there, it really started to get a lot worse from there. And, I did my thing. I, got into sales of drugs. And that was really what just kind of blew my life up into something that I never ever imagined it would ever even become.
Right.
Um, and so it became, in and out. I was in and out of jails. I was in and out of prison. I was getting, short sentences, maybe 6 months, 9 months here, and kind of in and out. And it just became this cycle. And it really, really wore down on me. You get to that point where you're like, I just cannot live this life anymore.
Mm.
Um, so it was in 2017. I was a week home or a week away from coming home, and they had hit me with 6-year-old charges. And I knew that that was probably the time that they were going to hit me with something much harder than I had done previously.
Mm.
Um, and, I had maxed out. So I was able to bond out on those charges. And during that time, was when I really, really started to change my life. I, you know, found sobriety for the first time in over a decade. I was working. I had my first son. He was born in February of 2018. And
Okay.
it really was that experience that led me to where I am today. Because going through the criminal legal system with a child completely changed my view of everything. And it was one specific moment when the prosecutor that was over my case and my public defender had brought up the conversation of you should probably just start looking for adoption agencies because right now you're looking at 16 years. And that like lit a fire inside me of you're not even looking at me as a person. You have no idea what my home life is. I have an incredible husband who, should I go to prison, will have my child. But just because I was in the system, they assumed that I had nobody, that I
Mhm.
knew nobody. And that to me was horrific because it really made me start thinking, what about the people who don't have someone there to watch their child, or situations like that? They just have to say, okay. It was just mind blowing. So I
Wow.
fought that case for 2 years, and I don't want to say fortunate, but when I was originally looking at 16 years to get it down to 2.5, I did feel fortunate that, when I went in, to my day for sentencing. I didn't know if I was going to miss my son's like first walking and his first words, or if I was going to be coming home to him nearly graduating high school. So it was in that moment, I felt fortunate that it was only 2.5 years. Um,
Absolutely. And that was a blessing. Sorry for cutting you off. I think that was your
no,
blessing. You know, I'm not really like this religious person, but I do believe in
yeah,
God. And I think that was a God calling for you to not give you 16, but to give you this time to come home to your family. You know, I think that is a blessing in itself, you know,
yep,
and we receive these blessings, you know,
yep,
constantly, you know, because we
absolutely.
human and you know, a lot of times we're not horrible people. We're not, you know, we just like you said,
Yeah.
under circumstances, we make wrong decisions. Just don't
Yeah.
label us as our last, you know, bad decision. Sorry for cutting you off though.
No, it's true. And that's just so relevant to, I think, what all of us go through. People will talk to me oftentimes like, that's so horrible that you had to go back. But I truly believe that whether it's God, the universe, that something put me through that situation because it was the first time that I could go into incarceration with a clear mind. And I knew that I had to spend that entire 2.5 years learning everything that I could about policy, learning everything that I could about helping people file grievances. And I spent that time just learning and soaking everything in like a sponge because I was angry and I knew that when I come home, like this is my calling. My whole life, I had never known, like, what am I really here for? What
Mm,
It was something I struggled with. Do I even have a purpose? And that was such a defining moment in my life where I knew this is what I'm here to do. Like, I'm here to help end mass incarceration and get people home to their families, get them the resources that they need. And, I am thankful that I was able to go back to prison in that moment because not thankful for the prisons. Being in prison during COVID was not a fun time. It was really scary, but it uh it brought me to where I am today, and for that I'm always thankful.
absolutely. I was also in prison at the height of the COVID. You know, I came home August 10th, 2020, when it just
Yeah.
started, and it was a scary moment. I can imagine everywhere in all other states, just being
Yeah.
confined with somewhere where you couldn't go nowhere. You was confined to this
Yeah.
little area, this space. That was definitely scary. A lot of people was catching it. I didn't know if I was gonna come home because of it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you start to think a whole lot of things. I also see the similarities too with life, and so it can be like everywhere. I speak to a lot of people, a lot of men and women that's formerly incarcerated that I know, and people that I know of, and a, a lot of times our lives are so connected with each other. Whether you're in Arizona, New York, or Houston, or Wyoming, or Utah, you know, and we all share like a similar story with our lives and the way we grew up, because I also was in and out, you know, and I didn't get it until I got the hammer hit me with 25 years to life, you know, and at that time I thought I would never be coming home, you know, and having to go through this self introspection, what I define this as. I had to close that gate on myself and stay in the cell and read these books and
Mhm.
educate myself and go down to the law library, you
Yeah.
know, because that's the only way I knew how to get out, from older people telling me, listen, you just went to trial and blue trial. You need to go to the law library and try to get yourself out. That's the only way you getting out is through the court system. And so, I got into the law library, and I received my legal research and management certification, and I began to work in the law library for 13 years, helping, and that was my calling. I knew
Yeah.
that this is something I want to do. I want to help people when I come home. I want to make a difference in the community now. And so there's a lot of brothers. I'm from New York State, and in New York State, wherever I went, whatever prison that I went to, because they
Mhm.
transfer us a lot for many
Yeah.
various reasons. And wherever I went, there was a group of men that always went down to the school building, always created programs for each other, for the
Mhm.
population. And I wanted to, to get in that. I wanted to be in that in crowd. And so I began to grow and develop in there. How can you tell me, the last time you went to prison, like, how was that for you to be sentenced, and knowing that you have to be away from family now, and just your mindset, really your state of mind at that time, if you could share with us.
Yeah. It was the 2 years that I was on bond, I didn't tell a soul. I told no one because I was embarrassed, which I was so ashamed that I was going back, and I knew that there was gonna be so much judgment of like, "Oh, well, she said she was doing good, but I felt so much shame because of how stigmatized incarceration is, and, you know, I felt like I couldn't even tell some of my family that I was going to be going because it hurt my heart so bad. My grandma was in her 80s at the time, she was in her late 70s, and she would always say, like, when you do time, I do that time with you. And
Mm,
with her, I believe that. She she truly, her heart was with me the entire time. And, I all I could think about was the comment she had made, when I came home in 2017, which was, you know, if you ever went back, I don't know how I would ever find the will to live if you were gone again.
mm,
So I'm fighting that battle of, how do I tell my family that I am going to be gone again, and
yeah.
that here my baby is going to be here. My poor husband, this should be a happy time. He's getting his son, his first child ever. And in his mind, he's worried about, are we going to end up homeless on the streets because we don't have a two-person income anymore? Um, so I finally told everyone the week before my sentencing, and it was like shockwaves were sent through my family, my friends. Everyone just couldn't believe that it was happening. And people were upset that I hadn't told them, but the moment that it all really hit was, so I had signed an open plea, 2.5 to 6.5, so they could have gone anywhere within that range.
Mhm.
So, it was like the earth, when you feel like everything is moving around you and you're just stuck still. That was how I felt in that moment. And
Absolutely.
my son was in the courtroom, and I just remember him waving and smiling. He was 9 months old, and he's just waving at me, smiling at me. And that was like, it felt like every ounce of blood had been just drained from my body, because I knew that he did not understand what was happening.
Mhm.
And, I wasn't able to talk to him for 3 months. It took 3 months for visitation and all of that to go through. And, when I finally talked to my husband, he had said that the whole first month that I was gone, he would just cry all night until he had, a shirt of mine to cuddle. And that's even now, he's 6 years old now, and I still live with fighting that guilt. You know, he
Absolutely.
he remembers what it was like to come spend every single weekend in prison visitation, and I try to sometimes I have to make light of things. When something's so traumatic, you got to
Absolutely.
learn to sometimes make light of it. So we always joke that, my toddler had done more time in prison than some adults. But it was
Mhm.
tough.
That's
It
right.
was
No
hard.
question. You definitely have to make light of it because it's an emotional breakdown. Period.
Yeah.
For most of us, I left my son. He was 4 months old. I never seen my son again until the age of 14. And I fought a battle to 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 gain visitation rights for my son. But and I let him know when we did reunite when he was
Mhm.
14, he didn't even know where he thought I was in the military from what his mother told
Yeah.
him. And when he found out, he asked his uncle to bring him to see me at 14. And
Oh,
me and him, we've been inseparable since. He's one of
good.
my producers on Success After Lockdown, and
Oh, I
he's
love that.
he also films. He does filming. He goes into the prison and film
Mhm.
graduations, parenting graduations that we have here in New York State. So he does a lot for the community, and
So
that's just a blessing, because that tore me apart. That I had the audacity to leave my son that I said I loved so much, and I
yeah.
wanted a son so bad, and I finally had a son in 1992, October, and I got locked up for murder in February of 1993. Like, that took a big toll on me emotionally and psychologically too. For the better as well, because I live with it, every day of my life. Even to this day, I've been home August 10th, 2020, and I still think about I left him. He's 30
Yeah.
now, my son, going on 31 this year. And I always think about, wow, like, what's going on in his mind. He lives in the city in Brooklyn, and I live up in Albany,
Mhm.
New York, and we 3 hours apart, but we always talk. We always, FaceTime. We do a podcast together. I do Success After Lockdown podcast in the city when we not on StreamYard, at an organization, a non-for-profit organization called Exodus Transitional Services. And my son is heavy into non-for-profit organization. He
That's so good.
volunteers. He also work at this center called Lincoln Center in New York City. So you have Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. He works at both of them doing filming there.
That's
But
awesome.
it's definitely an emotional roller coaster when the child is involved, and we
Yeah.
and we begin to grow and develop. So we begin to mature, and our
Yeah.
growth and development kicks in, and then we realize, like, wow, like, I really just left him. I left my
Mhm.
family. These are people that I know that love me, and
Yeah.
I thought that I was doing something by wanting to have more money to help them when they didn't care about the money. They just wanted to see me there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a big, uh, realization is when you realize they just want you there. And, the parenting thing was really what led me into my first thing coming home. My first target was the, women's dignity for incarcerated women in Arizona. Um, and we were able to finally get that piece of legislation passed in Arizona in 2021. It still needs some work, you know. There there are still some things that need worked on, but women are no longer being shackled during birth in Arizona. They get 72 hours to bond with their child after birth. Um, I want to make it so much bigger, and we'll get there. But
that's right.
you know, that was what just skyrocketed when I came home, and that was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. And then I learned too that it wasn't just in my mind. I think when I came home, I was thinking small in those ways, but through becoming starting to work at dream.org, which was Dream Corps when I started, starting to see a bigger picture of there are so many pieces that tie into this, mass incarceration that the possibilities are really endless of how far we can take it.
Yes, absolutely. So I also do a lot of advocacy work here in New York State. You know, this is actually my first experience because prior to me coming to prison, like I never had a job. You know, I've never worked in my life. I sold drugs from the age of 12 to 20 years
Yeah.
old till I went to prison. And so, um, like I again, I knew this was my calling because inside I began to realize and understand, you know, the significance of change, of
Yeah.
of doing right. You know what I mean? So because all I ever remember from my past was negativity. And so I
Yeah.
vowed to myself that I will forever be positive from here on out. And I was one of those men in there that got it early. A lot of times it
Mhm.
takes people 10 years, 15, even 20 years. Sometimes they never get it. Some people that I grew up with never got it. And went to their grave never getting it. However, I got it early. It was like at the beginning I began to realize
Yeah.
my choices, my bad choices, my horrific choices in life. And
Mhm.
so I look at that now in terms of when you were in there, was there any type of self-help therapeutic programs or things like that in there? Because I say that because we actually created our own self-help therapeutic programs, where I started at in this New York State prison called Clinton, where they didn't have any programs, didn't want any up there. But we went to that yard, we went to the corner, of the yard, and started conversing with each other, building, and we had to create our own for ourselves. How was it in there for you?
So, on paper, they have some programs, but, you know, where are they? You know, who was getting these programs? Because we sure weren't seeing them. So it definitely was. That's what I really wish the public would understand is there are some incredibly talented, smart, just brilliant people in prisons. And I will always be thankful to, the OGs that took me under their wing because they really did. They allowed for, people to grow programs. So we had art programs, music programs, um, you know, peer based therapy programs that was all facilitated by people in there. And, people would build out these huge, like, program guides. And, it wasn't just some willy nilly. I know you know what I'm talking about.
That's
Like,
right. That's what we
so
did.
much time. And it's really beautiful to see the impact of people who have made tough, bad, terrible decisions coming together to uplift each other, And I saw more of that in prison than I do out here in the real world,
Mhm.
The amount
Facts.
of just support and care and love that is behind prison gates and prison walls. I think it would shock people to see how much we support our own and just, you know, everybody that's incarcerated. But yeah, very similar to that.
Absolutely. And if I could just share that too as well with you, because I think that's very important when you said society would be shocked. A lot of times they are. So we had a college program in Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York State Prison. And in Sing Sing, you can get your associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree.
Mhm.
And so when I heard about it from a friend that was with me up in Clinton, he told me, "Yo, listen, this education is down here. I received my GED in 1995. Once I got transferred down there, I got into the program. I received my associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree in Sing Sing. And in there was a group of men. Thank you. There was a group of men, a group of us that created, all sorts of self-help therapeutic programs for the population. And one thing that we created was an organization called Voices from Within. And creating this organization, we were able to write to senators and clergy people
Awesome.
that came back inside to visit us, to have a meeting with us once a month. And we shared the things with the limited access that we had being in prison. We used to share the things that we did for the community. And so we connected with them and we collaborated with them, and we raised money through the population. So these are brothers that's in there that don't even have, don't have jobs. That's porters that get $6 every 2 weeks. They would give us 50 cents, $1, to raise money, because we wanted to create a gun buyback program for the
Mhm.
communities we came from in the city, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan. So we created, we gathered this money, and we told the senators how much we raised, and they was in awe with us. So
Oh,
they
I bet.
began, senators and the clergy, they began to match our money we raised, each of them. And we
That's amazing.
and the gun buyback program was born, with
What?
us still
That's
in prison.
amazing.
Absolutely. We also raised enough money under the organization that I was a part of, that this young lady out of New Jersey was shot by a stray bullet. She was an innocent bystander, and she was a quadriplegic, and she needed the van to get her wheelchair and get
Mhm.
around. And we had raised money to buy her a van for
That's
her
amazing.
circumstances. So it's a lot of things that we do that like what we speaking to. I'm speaking about what you said, how people would be so shocked. We
Yeah.
also had celebrities who came to, and they still come to every graduation that we
That's
have
awesome.
in Sing Sing. So we have Mercy University, which used to be called Mercy College, and Sing Sing Correctional Facility, as well as NYTS, that's New York Theological Seminary, which you can receive your master's degree in theology. And we have these programs in Sing Sing. And every year we have a graduation where we take the entire visit room and we transform it into a university. And
That's
the
amazing.
president from Mercy University, as well as the president on down from NYTS, they come in on graduation days, and we have cap and gowns, and our
That's
families are invited. The administration superintendent allows all the families to come. It's held at nighttime from like 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And we have food for the families that's there, and we have speeches, and and it's like a moment that's like no other. And
mhm.
everybody that I seen with my own eyes, from Ice T and Coco, Harry Belafonte, God bless his soul,
Mhm.
Warren Buffett was at our graduation. Doris Buffett, his sister who's passed away, she came to
Mhm.
every graduation before she passed away.
Wow.
Whoopi Goldberg was at our graduation. So when they came in, I'm speaking to what you was talking about earlier, where people was like shocked to see what we do under
Yeah.
those limited circumstances that we under. And they
Mm.
was in awe, like they couldn't believe that, the programs that we created for ourselves, and the transformation that we begun, preparing for society. So
Yeah.
it's we definitely, it's understandable what we do. And this is globally. I know that what we doing in New York State, I from speaking to people like yourself and meeting others in other
Mhm.
states, I know that we do great works under the circumstances,
Yeah.
limited circumstances, those that's transforming their lives, such as
Yeah.
yourself.
Absolutely. It's
Yes.
beautiful. It really is a beautiful thing. I'm glad to, when we have things like success after lockdown and people coming into prisons for these things. I just, I'm so excited to see it become, it's talked about more often and more openly so that people can realize, there's such a scary picture of what people see in prisons, and it's not helped by, some of the crime shows or like, dramatized 60 Days In. People are like, oh my gosh, that is really crazy. And it's like, the one thing I always tell people is oftentimes when the intense things are happening in prison, it absolutely is because of the circumstances that people are put in. And when people are successful, I fully believe it's in spite of prison, not because of it. It's because of the people that are in there supporting and raising each other up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so on our StreamYard podcast, Success After Lockdown, we always have a segment that's dear to us and that's serious and that we talk about with everybody that we speak to that's formerly incarcerated. So let's get into it.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, on the beat.
So this is our cell therapy session that we do on StreamYard where we talk about mental health and how pertinent this is, mental health, when it comes to those formerly incarcerated. I want to just get your thoughts on mental health in the criminal justice system and how deeply rooted it is within prisoners, family members. What you think about that?
Yeah. Trauma is at the core of, I believe, nearly everything that has to do with the criminal justice system. Often trauma is what leads people to the decisions that they make, whether it's trauma from poverty, trauma from abuse, trauma related to substance use, which then is also often created by trauma. Um, and then going through the system itself is extremely traumatic when you are stripped of everything that you've ever known, your liberty, your property, your clothing, your dignity, all of that. It has a profound impact on the mind, and that is a ripple effect that, reaches out and it touches our families as well. It's traumatic when your family member goes into prison and you don't know if they're going to make it out on the other side. Those types of things don't just go away overnight. I think that as people are coming home from prison, we need significantly more support systems in place for, post-incarceration trauma syndrome, or, whatever it is that you like to refer it to. People coming home from prison are traumatized, and some people hide it better than others, but the prison industrial complex as a whole is traumatic. And we have to have supports for people coming home, because oftentimes so many of us are thrown into, here's real life. You're under a parole officer. You have to get a job. You have to complete all of these different things when you may not even be whole as a person, inside. You're still broken. You've been warehoused for years, decades, months, depending on what your sentence was. And that trauma doesn't go away. And if that trauma isn't healed, we're just continuing cycles. It's going down to our children and their children. And, that's why we have so much generational incarceration, because we have to heal the whole. It's a holistic, you know, type of thing that we have to look at, where we're not just healing the person who was incarcerated. We're not just healing their child. We have to completely redo and reimagine the way that we look at the criminal justice system and the people who are inside and coming home and their families.
Absolutely. I always, when I look at trauma, I always say that, we have all types of levels of trauma.
Mhm.
Like, and you named a few, just a few, touching the surface. And
Yeah.
there's so much more trauma because you also have those that also got it together, somewhat. And I speak of myself when I say that, that's still, you know, I'm not escaped from the trauma, the PTSD that I suffer from every day. I think that everyone that been in that prison system, wherever we at, I think that we suffer through some type of PTSD.
Yeah.
Because there's levels of it. And suffering through it at the same time, identifying, that's key to being able to identify. So that's where
Mm.
my blessing come from. For me, I think I've been able to identify those areas
Mm.
that I lack in, and I begin to grow and develop and adjust and try to bring forth myself and grow and develop in that phase. And so there's a lot of adjusting doing because okay, I prepared myself 10 years, at least 15, you know, before coming home. However, I've never been I've never been in corporate America in my life. Everything I learned, it was through current affairs. It was through my past life, knowing math very well, from being in the drug game and,
Yeah.
taking a lot of those traits with me and doing the right thing now, doing it
Mhm.
the right way, as well as uh, uh, just being able to work in society and then coming home and having to adjust to family.
Yeah.
So we we know our family. However, being taken away from each other for 1 or 30 years, it's an adjustment phase that you have to come back to,
Yeah.
with each other. And so a lot of that, a lot of that is real. It's real, and it definitely needs to be addressed. When I have my partner, he always say that, rehabilitation, transitioning, transformation
Mm.
starts at the beginning of incarceration. You know,
Absolutely.
how do you feel about that?
No, I agree. It's, something that I feel a lot of us have been kind of screaming from the rooftops that so many of these, prison ran programs or even, maybe contracted organizations that come in, they're thinking, 2 months, 3 months before you're going home. That preparation should begin way at the beginning because you can't pack 3 months of preparation for someone who's been incarcerated for 20, 25 years in 3 months. I mean, it doesn't make sense, and
Absolutely.
especially when you have people coming home after extended sentences where they may not have even ever used technology before. Like all of these things can tie into the trauma, and it's just yeah, that's a big one for me.
Well, they
I
do.
think that
All of them do tie into the trauma.
yeah,
Yeah, they
it really
do. And what happens is we in New York State they have pre-release program, and you
mhm.
you you get in pre-release after you make the board, and 90 days before you go home they put you
Wow.
in these pre-release programs, and then they give you textbook, so these certain programs or organizations that might be out there in your area, and then send you on your way. There's no therapy. There's no mental health moment for that person who's about to transition out into society. So I think what helped me was I truly prepared myself by keeping aware of current affairs. Of I didn't know anything. I didn't when I left. I left in 1993. When I
Mhm.
left, they had a phone in a box, that
Yeah.
you attach to your car, the lighter, and it cuts on. So technology, I knew nothing. However, what helped me was, I began to learn on word processor. Then I began to learn Word. You know what I'm saying? And we weren't caught up with times in New York State because we don't have no internet or any of that. But by me being in school, it allowed me to learn how to type. It allowed me to learn how to, do these things and come home and I guess be a little bit more prepared with life because that over there, I would never, ever, ever choose to go back that way. So I have to learn all I can this way, in
Yeah.
corporate America. And so that was my motto, my mentality being in there is that there's no way that I sell poison to the community, my community or no other community ever again. So I
Mhm.
had to learn how to master corporate America the right way because
Yeah.
I don't go nowhere on any white collar crime or anything that will put me back behind a bar, So it's definitely important, the mental
Yeah.
health aspect of one's life after incarceration. If you
I
have
think,
anything else that you'd like to share on that.
yeah, I think too, something I've noticed even within our own communities of reentry organizations, advocacy organizations, I think that oftentimes they see someone doing well and they think that that means that the trauma's gone. So I think that we have to do a better job of ensuring that these organizations and advocacy groups understand that, you know, just because someone's been home for, you've been home for, I came home a month after you, September 21st of 2020. So,
Okay.
3
Congratulations
years.
too.
Thank you.
Right.
You know, just because someone's been home for 3 years or, maybe they just got their master's degree or things like that. Like, sometimes we always have to hold each other to a standard, but we have to do so with the understanding that people coming home from prison are working through things that the general population likely could never even imagine. And it's so important, you know, I believe that every organization, whether it, if they're dealing with an incarcerated population, they should be doing trauma informed trainings for all of their
Absolutely.
employees. I think that we should be better preparing our friends who aren't directly impacted to deal with those of us that are directly impacted because, you know, we can't set unrealistic expectations. And I see that happen all the time. And, so many of my sisters and brothers from the inside have come home and just drove themselves into the grounds because they're trying to meet these expectations put on them by people who have never been incarcerated, and that's to me is
Mhm.
a really big problem that I see. So, we'll keep working on it and I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like 10 years down the road. What programs do we have to help with PTSD for those of us that have been inside? Um, and just remember also for those of you who are coming home, reach out to those of us that have been out for a couple years because if you are ever feeling like you can't handle things, like you want to go back out, like you can't handle life, those of us who have been home, we are always here for you. I always tell people my phone is on 24/7. If you need to call, Mama Bear, if you need me to pick you up from South Phoenix at 2:45 in the morning, call me and I will be there for you. But that just
Absolutely.
ties into our tight community of those of us that are impacted and
Oh, absolutely. I was going to ask you that question. What would you say to, people that's preparing to come home? You said it right there, like that, right there. Call you and you will help. You will be
yeah.
a support. I just want to point out a organization to you, if you haven't
Mhm.
heard of it, called Exodus Transitional Community Services.
Okay.
Exodus is based in New York. Um,
Okay.
Based in New York City in Manhattan, a place called Newburgh, New York, and Poughkeepsie, New York. I work for Exodus. I do my podcast at Exodus. They have a podcast room there. The Exodus has all different type of levels of trauma units, and we cater solely, but not primarily, to formerly incarcerated men and women. But
Mhm.
they Exodus doors open for anybody that come off those
Amazing.
streets and come into their domain. And
Amazing.
I know of and know and I am a part of a whole lot of organizations in New York State, and by far Exodus have them on trauma informed education, getting it
It's
out
amazing.
there, and they also go back and they advocate for people in the court system. So
Love
if
that.
someone comes to us and they have a charge, they have a contract with the court, the New York City court system, where
Mhm.
they come on the side of the public defender and ask the judge, would the judge, be fair and allow that defendant to come in Exodus and let us take them through our programs. So,
It's amazing.
no question. And I think we need to see more of that all over this country. I think that, that is a integral part, pivotal part of, I guess, that threading that the pieces together in this country with the criminal justice system, and being able to combat this stereotype too, of this recidivism rate that's so high everywhere, that everybody look at and right away judge, a person that been in prison before
Yeah.
by this recidivism rate that society holds against on top of us, over us. Like, look, they're gonna go back. They've been in prison, they bound to go back,
Yeah.
and while in some cases that's true. And some I'm here to highlight, I created this platform to highlight those that I believe are never going back, to that prison system. Absolutely. And so I appreciate this time too. One more question I do want to ask you that
Yeah.
people ask me, eh, like, how does, like, just if you could measure a year in prison and a year out here, how
Mhm.
does it feel? Which one is faster for you, if you can imagine that? Like, with life moving in there, because that's a totally different world in there too. Being in
Yeah.
this prison, within these prison walls, and then coming out into society. Which one for you feel faster? Just looking at it from a 1 year span.
So it's weird, because there are times like when I was looking at my son growing, I felt like it was flying. Like, oh my gosh, my son is just going. But when I was looking at my own time, I was like, this is just creeping by. I felt like every year in the system was 10 years out here. And then I come home and I feel like it's moving so fast. I just want to hold on to it. When you've lost time to the system, like you just want to hold on to that time that you have home with your loved ones. And, it's just flying by. Yeah. But yeah, I
Uh,
feel like it dragged. It dragged. Looking
yeah,
back now, it didn't seem as bad, but I know it's just because I remember those nights up all night. I was a painter and I would just paint and paint, you know, and it just felt like every time I was marking a day off that calendar, it felt like forever.
wow. I did the same thing. I marked them days off that calendar. A lot. I got a calendar every year from the church. The church
Yeah,
gave
me
out
too.
calendars every year, and I marked that whole 12 months every year.
Yeah.
I'm talking about hands down, dedicatedly, you
Yep.
know, until that time came for me. And that was everywhere I went. Whatever prison I went to, I got transferred. They always had a chapel that gave out calendars. If
That's
nothing
amazing.
else, they gave us calendars.
Yeah.
As 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 uh as far as me coming home, I've been home August 10th,
Yeah.
2020. I was on life parole. So I had 25 years to life. August 10th, 2023, I've been off parole. I just got off parole August 10th, 20.
Yay!
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Absolutely.
Freedom.
Freedom, yes. And for me, it's been 3.5 years, going on 4 years, but it feel like 4 days still. It still feel like
Good.
yesterday. And I
Yeah.
know that I've been through so much out here, transitioning out here, and I've done so much in the community, with the community, for the community. Being able to create a youth empowerment basketball tournaments for the youth to come from New York City and travel to Newburgh and play in tournaments, and a lot of things that because that's I'm invested now. I'm invested. My life is invested in the community, and it just seemed like yesterday, for me.
Like
When I,
yesterday, you were walking out the gates. Yeah.
absolutely,
God.
so that's
Yeah.
and so that feeling I know for you is probably similar, coming
It's
home.
shocking. It's so odd when you're like 3 years. Like how so odd, you know? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to appreciate you because we coming up, we creeping upon time. If you could, for our audience, our followers, families, if you could share, what you have going on, your website,
Mhm.
anything, any links that we can stay in touch with you and follow you.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, 2024 is definitely my year, making a lot of moves this year. My main work here in Arizona, I do work for Arizonans for Transparency and Accountability in Corrections, and I run that with my incredible best friend, John Fabricius, who he did, 15 years in the system, and my friend Jessica McTurk, who did 10 years. So we run that, and that is aztraco.com. So we can go ahead and get that link out to everybody. I'm also on LinkedIn. It's just under my name, J. Alexandria Hunt-Garcia, which is long, I know. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, X. So I am, all over there. My main goals is, I'm out here lobbying for legislation that brings people home, with a large focus as well on harm reduction and ensuring that we're lowering overdose rates and getting people in our communities what they need, to stay safe and, you know, not dying from drugs, which sadly, as we're all seeing in our communities, is a huge problem. So yeah, ATAC is incredible. And then in a couple weeks, if you do follow me on socials, in a couple weeks, my husband and I will be dropping a new organization, a new project that we're working on. So we're really excited for that. But my husband might be mad if I laid too many of those cards out. But we are coming with some good stuff. So I hope to see, everyone on my Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is that you find me on.
Absolutely.
And my Twitter link, I think I just changed it should be J Alexandria GARC. So it's an odd one, but all my links are on my LinkedIn.
Absolutely, and when you and your husband's project come out, us here at Success After Lockdown will make sure we repost, and get it out there on our platform as well. And just I would definitely love for us to stay in touch.
Of course.
Success After
Yeah.
Lockdown and what y'all doing out there because we trying to create a connection, with all the states, as many states as we can. So we just begin to take our podcast on the road. Our
No.
first stop was Florida. We did our podcast in Florida, which is season 3 coming out this month.
Awesome.
For Success After Lockdown, we plan to go to Atlanta. We plan to go to Houston, to Utah, Missouri. Yes, in Arizona. We plan to come out to Arizona at some point.
That'll
And
be
so that's what we are attempting to create a bridge, to connect all of our states together, all of these men and women as yourself and myself that's formerly incarcerated, that's doing stuff, doing big things in our community, for our community.
Yep. Connection is key. Connection is key. I'm a huge believer in that. So I'm looking forward to following your journey as you're making moves. And yeah, definitely Arizona, we're always arms open to you. So we look
Appreciate that.
forward to
Appreciate
it.
that. We're gonna hold you to that too. We're gonna stay in
Yeah,
touch with you because we coming.
I'm hoping this year I'll get up there to New York. So I will let you know when I'm up there in New York as well.
Absolutely, because we do a lot of big things in New York that I'll keep you posted on stuff too.
Okay.
We do a lot of reentry work, a lot of reentry work.
That'd
You
be
know,
awesome.
with that, I want to say I appreciate you. It was a blessing meeting you, and and I don't know anybody in Arizona, but now I do.
Now you
I know,
know, and
now I
I
do.
can introduce you to a bunch of people, and we can
And
let everybody know, that all across
absolutely,
the nation there are people finding huge success after lockdown, and we're just out here in society. No one would probably guess,
yeah, absolutely. Unless we shine this bright
Yeah,
light on us, and the light is definitely shined on you. That's how we found you, and we appreciate you.
I'm so glad we connected. I'm looking forward to, you know, doing more work with you if possible, and just helping you in any way. I'll always be sharing your podcast around and, getting the word
Appreciate
out.
Appreciate you. Let's stay in touch. And with that, another successful conversation with DJ Alexandria Hunt-Garcia, and appreciate you all. Peace and blessings.